Ready to go whenever you want.
All right, get started.
Okay, I'm going to call this meeting to order. This is the City of Lafayette Transportation and Circulation Commission meeting being held on Tuesday, February 20th, 2024. So we'll begin by going into item number 2, which is a roll call. I'll call your names and please indicate that you're present, starting with Vice Chair Paul DeGiorgio.
Present.
Commissioner Greg Brown.
Present.
Commissioner Lynn Hedane.
Present.
Commissioner Vianney Serrier.
Present.
And Commissioner Stella Weatherspoon.
Present.
And I'm Bart Carr. I'm the commission chair, and we have one vacancy on the commission.
Weatherspoon.
Oh, excuse me, Weatherspoon. Item 3 is a disclosure for remote participation. We have no disclosure to make. So we'll go into adoption of the agenda. Can I hear a motion to adopt the agenda?
So moved.
Second.
A second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, before we get into public comment, I have a couple of things that I need to read, so I'll do those briefly and quickly. First, regarding teleconferencing access. As a courtesy and as technology permits, members of the public may participate virtually in this meeting. However, the city cannot guarantee that the public's access to teleconferencing technology will be uninterrupted, and technical difficulties may occur from time to time. Every effort will be made to restore teleconference access. However, unless required by the Brown Act, Transportation and Circulation Commission meetings will continue despite technical difficulties for participants using the teleconferencing, and I'm referring to Zoom option. In the event of a teleconference, a Zoom interruption, members of the public are invited to join the meeting here in person. That's the first item. And then the second item is regarding public comment. Public comment must be within the subject matter jurisdiction of the commission and can either be given for items on the agenda at the time that that item is being heard, or during the public comment agenda item for items not on the agenda. In-person commenters are asked to submit speaker slips. Thank you for your submission. And public comment is going to be limited to 3 minutes. And so with that, we'll go into public comments. So again, this is the time for public comments that are not for anything currently agendized on tonight's agenda. So I don't see a slip from someone here in the room for general comments. Is anybody online? No? Okay, well then we'll move on to old business. There's no items under old business. So we'll go on to new business. And the only item under news business is the Lafayette School Zone Speed Limit Study. So we're being asked to forward, after discussion, forward the City of Lafayette School Zone Speed Limit Study to the City Council with an ordinance that would designate recommended speed limits around the cities and schools. Now, I assume that our recommendation can include recommendations from this body, right?
Yes.
Okay, so we have the latitude to make recommendations as part of what we forward to the City Council. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to staff, and Patrick Ollier can introduce the item.
Okay, we've got our presentation here. I've got a brief presentation. Tonight, as you know, I'm here to discuss with you the recommendations from the draft school zone speed limit study, which would result in reduced speed limits in defined school zones across the city. Slide. So here's just a brief outline of what we'll discuss tonight. First, I'll discuss the background of the study, discuss the guidelines set by the state, the recommendations from the study, and then a discussion of next steps. So why are we doing the study? First, I want to go back to the planning process for the Burton Valley Elementary pilot project study. And I believe that this commission, before my time, but I believe that this commission made a recommendation that the city look holistically at reduced school zone speed limits around all of the city's schools rather than on a case-by-case basis. And so some discussions of reduced speed limits were deferred from that point, from that stage. In addition, among the citywide recommendations, there was a category of recommendations that came from each of the rapid implementation school safety studies that were prepared for each of the schools in 2021, was a recommendation to consider adopting a 15-mile-an-hour school zone speed limit. Next, as you're aware, we recently updated our engineering and traffic survey study, which provides the legal basis for setting enforceable speed limits on roadways throughout Lafayette. That effort confirmed the prima facie speed limits on roadways throughout the city, and that allows us today to consider reductions in those speed limits around schools under certain conditions. And the timing is opportune, given that we are recommending a reduction in speed limits on several non-school zone roadway segments. And if approved by council, any changes to speed limits on any street in Lafayette, including around schools, can be messaged consistently to the public for implementation this summer. Slide. Nope. Nope. One more? Okay, yeah. So tonight I'm seeking direction from the commission to forward the school zone speed limit study to city council with an ordinance that would designate recommended speed limits around city streets. Slide. So jumping into the details, Parametrics, which is the engineering firm that prepared our engineering and traffic survey study, took a citywide review of roadway segments that would be eligible for school zone speed limits. To be clear, the guidelines around school zone speed limits are prescribed by the state, with very little flexibility provided to local jurisdictions beyond the decision to implement or not. First, I want to mention section 22352B2 of the California Vehicle Code, which sets a 25-mile prima facie speed limit at a distance of 500 feet on roadways that approach or pass a school building or school ground when children are present, regardless of the speed limit. So that had been set earlier to California AB 321 from 2007 that provides cities with the additional ability to establish a 15 or 20 mile an hour prima facie speed limit within 500 feet of a school building or grounds under certain conditions, which I'll discuss shortly. So the passing of AB 321 resulted in an update to the California Vehicle Code, section 22358-4, to articulate the conditions that must be met in order for cities to set reduced speed limits around schools. So the next slide, yeah. So this is a little more information about that section 22358.4 of the Vehicle Code. So again, jurisdictions in California are permitted to reduce speed limits to 15 or 20 miles an hour from a school building or school grounds, and it extends the 25-mile prima facie speed limit from 500 feet up to 1,000 feet on the following roadways. So roadways that meet the definition of residence district as defined by the state, and that's prescriptive. A resident district is defined by CVC section 515 as a portion of the roadway fronted by a residential dwelling house density of at least 16 dwellings per quarter mile on both sides of the street, or 13 dwellings per quarter mile on one side of the street. It's important to note that some residential streets in Lafayette do not meet this definition. The second requirement is that the roadway must have a current posted speed limit of 30 miles an hour or less, and the roadway cannot contain more than 2 vehicle lanes. So that's those are the conditions that are required in order to lower the speed limit to 15 or 20 miles an hour in school zones. So you'll see in the draft a list of streets that meet these conditions. Next slide, please. But first, I want to review why California has identified school zones as places where speed limits should be reduced. The short answer is that the intent is to enhance safety of kids walking or biking to school. If a vehicle driving at a slow speed hits a child, there's a greater likelihood that the child will survive with less severe injuries. As Officer Andy Comley reiterates when he discusses the Slow Down Lafayette campaign, vehicle speed is directly correlated to whether or not a person will live or die if hit by a car. So as an example, and as seen in this graph, a person hit by a car at 35 miles an hour is 5 times more likely to die than a person hit by a car going at 20 miles an hour. Added to this is the fact that kids do not have the same ability as an adult in terms of perception and other skills with regard to traffic safety. Next slide, please. In addition, and more specific to Lafayette, the recommendations from this study are aligned with other local initiatives to improve safety and reduce speeds. This includes our current Slow Down Lafayette campaign, which is focused on enforcement and education efforts to create a culture of slower driving throughout the city. It's also aligned with the recently adopted local road safety plan, which was developed as an approach to reducing the severity of collisions in Lafayette. The LRSP also identified speeding as one of the city's primary collision factors, and concerns about high speeds were raised pretty consistently throughout our public engagement process as part of the preparation of the LRSP. Finally, these recommendations are consistent with the city's priority to address safety around schools, including through the initiation of the Rapid Implementation School Safety Plans in 2021. I mentioned before that one of the recommendations that came from those studies was to consider adopting a 15-mile-an-hour school zone speed limit around each of the schools. Next, please. The effort to reduce speeds around around schools is not unique to Lafayette. Many jurisdictions in California, from large cities to small towns, have implemented provisions of AB 321 in order to improve safety outcomes near schools. So these are just a few photos from local cities when their school zone speed limit reductions is implemented. Next slide. Okay, now getting in a little more to the weeds on the recommendations as they relate to Lafayette streets. Parametrics looked at the roadways that surrounded 10 schools in Lafayette, which included a total of 22 roadway segments. So using the guidelines that I just reviewed as set by the state, what they found was that there are 15 roadway segments in which 15-mile-an-hour speed limits can be set, and 7 segments in which the prima facie 25-mile-an-hour speed limit is applicable. Next slide, please. So this is a helpful handy-dandy flow chart that provides information as to how each street was evaluated. Because I know there's a lot of confusing sections from the CVC. As well as the resulting school assembly signs that would be required to be installed in order to make the reduced speed limit zones enforceable. So the primary question is in the center. Does the roadway meet the following requirements that I just described? 2 lanes of traffic, speed limit at 30 miles an hour or less, and whether or not the roadway segment meets the definition for residence district. If the answer is yes, you move to the left. If the speed limit on that roadway segment is yes, then the following sign would be required, and 15 of those 22 roadway segments fall into that category in Lafayette. The answer is no, and the speed limit is higher than 30. The state requires that there be a transition zone from the higher speed to 25 to 15, but there aren't any roadway segments in Lafayette that are in that category. The answer to the 3 questions is a no. You move to the right of the flow chart. If the speed limit is yes, then a school assembly sign is required, and that roadway segment is maintained at 25 miles an hour. The answer is no, that there's a higher speed limit. Then 6 streets meet that category, and we would be eligible at implementing a 25-mile-an-hour speed limit in those zones. Does that make sense? Does this make sense, the flow chart?
Yes.
I hope it's in order to the mishmash of CVC. Okay. Yeah. I can pause on it if anyone wants, but we can also go back to it.
Does anybody have any questions for Patrick at this point?
No.
No?
Okay.
Okay.
Next slide, please. So this table shows the speed limit recommendations that are the result of the flow chart exercise described on the previous slide. The locations of the speed limit reductions are also provided on the maps that were included in the report, included as part of the packet. Next slide, please. So tonight I'm looking forward to questions and discussion around the recommendations presented in the report. The next steps after tonight would be to take the study and an ordinance to designate the recommended speed limits in school zones to council. Staff would cite the new signs consistent with state guidelines and would make an effort to limit sign clutter as best as we are able. Staff would implement the new school speed limits along with any other speed limit reductions in the summer when schools are closed, and in an effort to implement all of the new speed limits as part of one combined effort. And this would be coordinated with a communication effort in upcoming months to inform residents of the new speed limits before the signs are installed. And then the next set of slides are those maps that I went into each of the schools. These are all in the back of the report, but they're color coded with the speed limits that would be the result of this study. So this is Ocklawaha High School with reductions on Stanley Boulevard, Deerville, and Brooklyn Hill. Next slide. Bentley is applied to Elmina Ranch Road. Burton Valley, apply to Marywood, Roar.
But just to be clear, blue is 15
Blue is
miles per hour.
15, right, and red is 25. Sorry, thank you. Thank you for that. Yep. Next slide. Happy Valley. 25, today that street is 30. All right, next slide. Area around Stanley and Lafayette Elementary School, so a mixture of 15 and 25 mile-an-hour speed limits, and maintaining the existing 25 on St. Mary's Road. Next slide. Merritt School, result in 15 mile-an-hour speed limit on Condit and Leland. St. Perpetua, apply to Hammer. Smithville Road, Pleasant Hill and Spring Hill in a small section of Quant. And finally, I think this is the last school, the Spring Hill School on Carroll Lane.
Mr. Chairman, may I ask a question?
Yes.
Yeah.
I think appropriate to this portion of your presentation. I'd like you to help us understand the 500-foot distance. Is that calculated from it's hard to understand from the report. If it's calculated from buildings or the edge of the property.
It's calculated from where a student can enter the property.
Okay, from gates or roadway segments or okay.
Right.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Okay, that's it, the conclusion of your presentation? Okay, thank you. We'll open it up now to commission discussion. And then following that, we'll have public comment. So on this item. So we'll go ahead and open it up. Does anybody have questions, comments?
Sure.
Go ahead.
I'm going to start with a question which is maybe not what you're expecting. So what I'd like to know is, and it's been a while since we mentioned 15 miles an hour. I'd like to understand a practical difference between 15 miles an hour and 20 miles an hour limits in the speed zone. And I had thought about this before I read Mr. Faulkson's letter, but it got me to thinking because my recollection was we have a 25 mile an hour speed limit in a lot of residential areas as a default. And so going down to 15 miles an hour, not necessarily in Burton Valley, but just in general, I'm curious about, is there a practical, stopping distance or reaction time or something else? Is there really a benefit for being at 15? And I don't know if there's a lot of cities doing that. So is there a practical benefit at being 15 versus 20?
You're asking from a safety standpoint?
I'm just trying to understand, because a lot of cities the law was saying you could be 15 or 20, right?
Yes.
And it seems like everybody's jumping at 15. Okay. So the question is that really necessary? And it gets into the light of, can we expect people to drive 15 miles an hour? You know, they also have to do interpretation of when children are present, and we can talk about that later. So I'm just curious to know whether, you know, I know they used to have charts where, you know, at X number of miles an hour, it takes you this long to react and then this long to stop. And I'm just trying to get your kind of thoughts on what's the difference in speeds?
Well,
Is it worthwhile?
15 and 20. I mean,
Yeah.
in my opinion, a 15-mile-an-hour speed limit sign raises more awareness as a driver. The one in front of in a speed limit sign raises awareness. And a lot of this is about being aware that you are in a different environment. You are within 500 feet of the school, and there may be children that are running out or walking across the street. And so some of it is just raising public awareness of where they are driving. I'm not sure if I'm prepared to answer the, you know, the sight distance,
Yeah, okay,
speed.
all right. And then
They can look into it.
the follow-up on that would be, what are our neighboring communities going to be doing? That is, Orinda, Moraga, and Walnut Creek. You know, one of the benefits of going to 15 would be if other cities were also doing it nearby, then in a public consciousness, it would be uniform, right? So do you have any knowledge of what the other cities are doing?
Yes. So we collectively, Parametrics and myself, looked at kind of a sampling of Bay Area, not necessarily our direct neighbors, but Bay Area jurisdictions. The majority are 15. In fact, the only 20 we could find, though there probably are more, is Walnut Creek. If I called them and asked, why is it 20 instead of 15? The answer was, well, it was done before my time. I think if we had to redo it, we would do it at 15. It's kind of a legacy in just a different time period. So there wasn't really a clear response.
Okay.
Orinda and Moraga, I think that they have not done this holistically around all their schools. And so we would be slightly different than them.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Can I add something?
Yeah, of course.
At 15 miles, you have a better chance of having less injuries than at 20.
That is true.
And but I'm not a physics major, but there must be a equation, for lack of a better word. So I think 15.
Well, I'd just like to make, if I may, just make an observation and then a comment. This is a very comprehensive action that we're, you know, contemplating and recommending to the board. It's going to affect 22 roadways in our community. 15 of those fairly significantly at 10 mile per hour speed reduction.
When children are present.
When children are present, and there's question on, you know, how do you know when the children are present or not? Given the comprehensive nature in this, as there, first of all, it would have been helpful to me if we had if someone from the police department present here to tell us about what speed conditions are around schools now, just to give us that perspective, that background in taking this action, or at least get something in writing from them indicating what the situation is, what conditions are, and what the real need is for this comprehensive plan to be put into place. That would have been helpful to me as I look at this, at what we're being asked to do tonight. Is there any thought in doing this in stages or more incrementally? You talked about there's a I think during your presentation you talked about a period of time where this is going to be implemented, but I'm just curious. There probably are some schools where speed is more of an issue than others. And I'm just wondering if this can be implemented in a more incremental way so that the overall surprise or what might happen if this were to be put into place all at once can be minimized. And also gives the city more of an opportunity to do outreach for the city and educate for the need for these speed reductions. So an observation and a comment, you can respond to that. If you
Okay, the police department, going back to that, I think it was more of a comment, but, they were consulted, and so, I can add the result of that conversation in the staff report to council. Thank you for that comment. They are supportive of this effort. They agreed, with the recommendation to reduce the limit to 15 versus 20. We discussed that, school zones can, after implementation, can be added to the rotation of locations as part of the Slow Down Lafayette campaign that the motorcycle officers are patrolling these days. In terms of whether or not this could be rolled out incrementally, the answer is yes. The recommendation came to do this holistically, and I think council supports that as well. I think it's less confusing to implement across all the schools versus just some, personally, but it can be implemented incrementally.
Do you know, when you talk to the police, did they indicate that there are some schools, some streets around schools where speeds are higher and where this needs to be addressed sooner rather than later?
They said they patrol more frequently around the schools around Pleasant Hill Road, so Spring Hill School. They also mentioned Stanley and Lafayette Elementary, probably because those are adjacent to arterials.
Right.
But they said that that's where they are more often in terms of school locations.
Okay. Commissioner Weatherspoon.
Yeah, I have two questions. So the first is about the time of day that this is applicable. I know you had some correspondence with some members of the public, and one thing that I think you quoted from the vehicle code in response was, quote, when children are going to or leaving the school, either during school hours or during the noon recess period. Okay, so are those three different conditions that you can choose from? So going or leaving school, during all of school, or only during noon? Because it says or, so I'm confused.
Yes.
It's
Yes.
confusing.
Very good point.
So, it is non-specific, and so I look at the vehicle code. When children, so it says, a 15-mile-an-hour prima facie limit in a residence district on the highway with a posted speed limit of 30 miles an hour slower, at a distance of less than 500 feet from or passing a school building or the grounds of a school building. Jumping ahead, while children are going to or leaving the school, either during school hours or during the noon recess period. And so my interpretation of that is when children are likely to be outside of the school grounds and adjacent to the roadway.
But when going to or leaving the school is the main criteria, it looks like.
But they also mentioned or during the noon recess period.
Right, and I guess, yeah, okay. Well, it seemed like going and coming either during school hours, I assume coming to school, leaving school, or noon recess, maybe leaving for something, coming, I don't know. But I mean, this is a kind of always a confusing point for any driver to wonder, is it applicable right now? How can you tell?
Right, and some states permit jurisdictions to add times to the time limit.
Does California?
No, it's when children are present.
Okay, okay. I have another question, and it's
So
about.
my interpretation is that the state is trying to generate awareness of, on a school day, there may be children in this within 500 feet of the school grounds, right? And so please be aware.
Okay. I have another question, and it's about El Nido Ranch Road and Happy Valley Road. Those are asterisked because they're called out in the E&TS for reductions.
Right.
And so if those reductions go through, then that changes what's possible
It's true.
on the school zone recommendation. And so I'm wondering, what is the status of the E&TS? I know it went to council, it got approved, now it's gonna come back to them.
Yeah, so the ordinance got approved because we needed to do that approval in 2023 in order to maintain enforceable speed limits. But then Mayor Anduri agreed to bring those several recommended other roadway segments with recommendations to reduce the speed limit back to council, and I'm going to bring it at the same time as this study. So that there's kind of one discussion about speed limit reductions from both studies.
So then, is this a kind of two recommendations here, that if, say, El Nido range is 35, then go to 25 miles per hour speed zone, but then if council approves down to 30, then go to a 15?
No, El Nido Ranch Road. Yes, we could go down to 15 on El Nido Ranch Road, and Happy Valley, we could go down to 25, and we could go down to 15.
The 15,
Yeah.
yeah, so I'm just wondering, I mean, are you asking us to consider that because the council may then make those step downs?
Currently, let's stick with the recommendations that are in the report, which are based on existing speed limits.
Okay,
Happy Valley Road is 30 miles an hour, isn't it?
Yes.
Yes. So yes.
But to follow up on that, so will this be heard before the other study? In other words, these recommendations could be implemented as this, and then this city council could come back and then change speeds downward on those two locations if they wanted to.
I could add another column to the report that says if the speed limits on those two streets are reduced, then recommendation B would be what I just mentioned.
Greg?
Patrick, you mentioned, signage and trying to be judicious about signage. We've heard that, a number of times from the community. I have a question, and you showed some examples of the signage, and then the report has it as well. Does MUCTD require, which of those signs are required? Like the school zone ahead, the end school zone limit, or is it just the school zone speed limit? How much signage would be required?
It requires a school zone sign. It requires the sign that says speed limit 15 when children are present. And then it requires a sign that says end school district or school zone.
So it's gonna be a minimum of 3, three in each way, right?
Yes.
For each segment.
Mhm.
Okay.
So that's an addition to what we have currently.
Yes and no. So what I also wanted to mention and should have in the presentation is that currently around many streets, schools, there are already signs with school zone speed limits. So in those cases, I want to make sure that sign locations, the signs are meeting current state guidance. So it wouldn't necessarily result in an addition of 3 signs.
Yeah, currently what I remember seeing is there's one sign that says school zone and then 25 mile per hour on one sign. So that seems like a better alternative than having 2 or 3 signs.
Oh, yes, right.
Yeah.
Right. We would strive to minimize the number of poles that are installed if we need to install poles.
The sign would say, when children are present. How big is when children are present?
Scroll back.
I mean, on the sign itself, physically,
Yeah, I'll show you what the sign says.
I know what it's going to say. I'm just wondering, how does that translate into size when you get it on the road?
Well, the state dictates the sizes as well of the signs. So, are you interested in see that on the bottom right? Which I think if you go back up one more, there.
I just hate to go up the streets with signs all over God's green earth. I think it's a shame, it's particularly in Burton Valley. They've worked so hard.
Well, it's a question of whether or not you value school safety or like sign clutter.
They are safe, trust me, very safe.
Well, and I guess my point is there is existing signs out there.
There are, yes.
And that may be an example of one of them there. Is that from Lafayette or somewhere else?
No. Well, it may be, but I don't. Each school has different signs currently out there. Maybe you don't even notice them, but we're going to clean things up. We're going to make sure that they're compliant with state guidelines.
And consistent.
It would be nice if you could make one sign do more than one thing. It indicates it's a school zone and provides the required speed limit.
Yes.
All right.
I have one more
Yes.
question. I noticed in some of the, somewhere in the report, it said that there was no speed survey done for some of these small residential streets. And I'm wondering if you could or have done that for some of the streets around schools that have speed humps right now, so that we understand just what are the existing conditions.
So I have that for Burton Valley. We have that for Happy Valley. I don't know if we have speed humps around
Stanley has
other
some.
schools.
Stanley, on School Street,
Oh, okay.
Yes.
Yes.
and
you're right.
then by Acalanes as well. Stanley Boulevard as well.
Yeah, right.
So you have for Burton Valley and for Happy Valley.
Yes,
Okay, but not for the other two.
correct.
Okay.
You're going to put the speed bumps on Happy Valley?
There are 2 speed humps on Happy Valley.
Oh,
I have a question. Once the commission or the city council decides to go forward with this, what is the time frame to get this implemented?
Summer of 2024. So we want to do it when schools are closed. And then the speed limit, non-school street segments that were recommended for the lowered speed limits as part of the engineering and traffic survey study can't be implemented until July 1st. So we would do this in the summer before schools reopen. And that would give us the spring to message this out through our different formats.
Okay, and then that was my next question. How are you going to let the public know, let the community know that this is happening?
Yeah, so I would work with Suzanne and Andy Comley and get the word out via, the weekly roundup and our social media posts and the police get their word out and through the school PTAs too, right? Because schools don't close for another couple months, so it would give us the opportunity to get the word out that way as well.
Speaking of schools and school district, were the school district notified of this? And
Yes, they
I
were.
assume they're in favor of it, but I'm just curious, did they have any comments?
They said, we are supportive of this and we have no issues.
Okay.
Yeah.
You might include that in your report to
Okay,
city
yeah.
council too. And then I'm still, interested in the idea of a phased implementation, although I understand now that you want to try to get this done during the summer period. I mean, for obvious reasons, but again, a phased implementation where you're addressing those streets around schools where speed is more of an issue than possibly others.
I'm sorry, Bart, would you clarify, when you say phased, do you mean it's going to be reduction in speed in 2 chunks, or it's phased in across a community?
Phased in across the community,
Okay.
You mean at once?
not at once, no, I'm saying not to do it at once, but to do it in phases. So you're addressing those streets and schools where speeds are higher first. and then doing the other streets that have been, identified in the presentation and the staff report later. So you would do it over a 6-month period or 1 year.
So we're not doing them all at once.
It might be a surprise or a shock to some neighborhoods that this is happening if they weren't aware of it. So over time, if you do it incrementally over time, it
I
gives the city
understand.
more time to communicate this is happening and why it's happening. That's just a thought, and I'm just throwing that out to the commission.
I have a question.
Yes,
I have a question about a specific on the page 3 of the staff report, Deer Hill Road. It talks about 400 feet west of Pleasant Hill Road, and I'm looking at the map and thinking about that. That really takes it just beyond the entrance to Sienna Ranch and the upcoming terraces. I had a discussion a while back with Commissioner Witherspoon about speeds, downhill speeds, that would be eastbound traffic coming down that hill.
Steep.
And I was wondering why 400 feet was chosen. Why wouldn't it have been 500 feet in that location? And can you have the signs at different lengths, one direction versus the other? Or did they all start and stop at the same spot? And I think that I've seen that, like, for example, around Bentley School, the end of the school zone is one location, and the start is another. Okay. But so do you have any comments on Deer Hill Road?
I would have to check, but probably because the entrance to the school, if you are a pedestrian or a cyclist, is 100 feet into Stanley.
Oh, okay. I was measuring from the intersection.
I believe it's fenced.
Yeah.
Okay. Right.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. I was thinking about it from the intersection, not from the school. Okay. Thank you.
I have one more question, sorry.
go ahead.
Carl made me think of this. So for all of these segments, are these going to be bi-directional? So in other words, if you're going to be going westbound on Deer Hill Road, would that apply to you as well? Even though you're going away from the school?
You're still within 500 feet of the school.
Okay.
School grounds. Yeah.
Any other questions or comments? Okay. If not, then we'll open it up to public comment. And I have one speaker slip here. Tim Keene. Is your time?
Tim Keene, I live at 616 Burton Drive,
Yeah.
way into Burton Valley Elementary. And I don't really know about all where these other schools are. I don't spend my time trolling around school zones, but I did read Mr. Folkson's letter. And if you well know Mr. Folkson, and he does have a certain expertise in this area, and his input was very useful, I think. And when I read it, I said to myself, do I need to turn up? Because he says it all. But I think it is important to turn up because you can tell me if I'm wrong, that part of your job is to look into the community and take into account what the community wants. Yes, that's the community here, of course, but it is important that we went through Burton Valley a long period. Was it 2 years? I don't know, it felt like a lot longer. But we started off the fact that, it was going to be, people say it's so dangerous, people were being killed and this and that. But when we actually get down to the real nuts and bolts of it, we find that Burton Valley is the safest place in Lafayette. And the other thing that Mr. Folkson quite nicely points out is that the speed limits now in Burton Valley, you don't need to put in a 15-mile-an-hour speed limit because it is. I mean, that's what the traffic is. And the speed humps are great. I mean, I like them. I have one outside my house. I also have one of those delightful signs outside my house too. But it's very important, I think, that we don't go and do things that we don't need to do. Why go and make trouble when there isn't any? If in Burton Valley the speed limit is 5, why do we need to change it? I can see that Arkansas High School district area different. You've got 4 lanes of traffic. You've got, I'm not sure how many kids actually walk to school these days. They all seem to drive. So it's a totally different situation. Same with Bentley. I mean, you have that, I forget the name of that road, but a lot of people drive pretty fast on the other road. Burton Valley isn't like that. We don't want to have 450 signs telling us what to do. And as was brought up, nobody knows what the sign means when children are present. So it's ridiculous. So when LMYA plays soccer on a Saturday or Sunday, now you have tons of kids there. You can go 25 miles an hour. But if you're at school, when the kids are in school in Burton Valley, if you know the school, it's up the top of the hill.
Yeah.
Children don't come out during recess, I don't think they'll have to. You don't find anybody, so it just doesn't make sense. And how are you going to enforce it? How is the police officer gonna say, well, it's 10 minutes after recess? But it doesn't say 10 minutes after recess, it says, I can't remember the word, but there is no, do children leave within 5 minutes, 15, half an hour? When does the day end at Burton Valley? Wednesdays are different to other days. Do we have to keep track of the school calendar in our car? And I'm driving down Stanley and I have to leaf through my Rolodex to find out what the school hours at Stanley are before I realize what the speed limit is. It makes no sense whatsoever. We're just causing pain and suffering when there isn't any. And I think somebody said, well, if the speeds are less, there's less accidents. We could have a 5 mile an hour speed limit. Do we want to go back to the days where a man had to walk with a flag in front of a car? I mean, it's ridiculous. I mean, the transportation subcommission, they need to think about motorists. It's not just children on the street. And Burton Valley, we've established that very few people walk this way anyway. It's also you meant to look after the motorists. Have you ever tried driving 15 miles an hour for a long time? I did, and I couldn't do it. The only way I could do it was put on cruise control. And then, and then I had about 6 people trying to rear end me up the back. So, all these things, it sounds great. Put up a sign. You look really good. Nothing's ever going to happen. But why can't we be a little practical? If in Burton Valley we don't need it, don't do it. If at Alcalanes we need it, let's do it. Okay, but I think we need to be a little more. We don't just say the whole of Lafayette, 25 miles an hour. Why not? That's on the basis of doing it everywhere. Why not? Then people wouldn't be surprised. I mean, it might be a new members of council because everyone would vote them out, but it's time that we got a little more specific about what we want to do. And the motorist isn't always the bad guy. Let's go ahead and remember that too. I mean, the motorist driving 25 miles an hour, there's nothing wrong with that. And I say, if you want to go back to the horse and buggy or man in front, hey, go for it. But the world's progressed. And it's time that we had a little insight on what the motorist wants. And I agree, we need to look after people who, I walk my dog all the time on those streets. And we need to look after everybody, but it's everybody. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions for Mr. King?
Well, I would like to precise something. It's not only during the school hours, but it's also when children are present.
I don't think that's what.
Patrick?
Restate your-
It's not specific in the code. They mention when children are going to or leaving school or the noon recess period.
Well, what happens if it's after 3 o'clock with a couple of kids? Wouldn't that when children are present?
Right? That would count as when children are present.
Okay.
And to follow up that, so on weekends for sporting events,
Yes.
that it's applicable then or not?
And then the other, I would like to somehow find out how much more damage you do at 20 miles an hour versus 15. There must be somewhere some research done. We know that at 25 you have much better survival rate than at 35, for example.
Okay, do we have any online comments on this?
There are no members of the public with their hands raised.
Okay, well, then I'll return this back to the commission for final discussion, and then we'll vote on the recommendation, whatever form that is. So any other comments, questions, discussion on this?
Yeah, this last point that Yanni raised, it would be really helpful to hear what the Lafayette Police Department's interpretation is. So what would they do? And when would they enforce this? I think that clarity would help.
Can we invite them? Here,
Well, I think
we have requested police department come other years and present to us and prove their case. And that might not be a bad idea at all.
I think Patrick said, well, you're talking about coming to this meeting.
Yeah, any meeting.
Now or any meeting, but I think Patrick
In
said,
the future, maybe. Yeah,
I think
because
Patrick
other-
indicated though that there was going to be a representative going to the council meeting when this is presented. So the council will get
That's
the benefit.
different. That's
No,
different.
I understand that. I'm just adding that as for clarification. And actually, Mr. Keene's comments and then the follow-on comments that have just been made raised a question in my mind of how, if you don't have a very clear time period of when children are going to be present just on a regular school day, how enforceable is that if you don't have clearly defined stop time when children are going to be present? How enforceable is that? That's probably not a question you can answer right now, but it's probably something you might want to ask the police about before you go take this in front of the council.
Sure. I do want to comment and say this isn't meant to be a punitive thing. It's really meant as well for awareness that a driver is coming into a school zone and that they should act with more care because there may be children on the street. So I know you're focused on the punitive side of this, but there's also the awareness of being in a very different
Well, I'm
section of roadway.
not so much focused on being punitive, but the threat of enforcement certainly helps to change behavior. And if the police are serious about on occasion going out and citing people that may be going too quickly, I'm just wondering how enforceable that might be if you don't clearly delineate start and the stop time when children may be present. So that's just a thought, and it's something that you might want to explore with the police. That might come up at the city council meeting. So, any other comments or questions? Or
Yeah, one thing, I'm not feeling keen about the segments not ending at intersections. I looked at the Walnut Creek study and pretty much all of theirs do. I find it seems to me, I don't know why, it's like a kind of gut reaction that when you're at an intersection, then you see something that relates to that segment, you just sort of focus in on it. Whereas if you're just in the middle of a road and then all of a sudden it changes, it just seems that is going to be
Problematic.
yeah, I'm not sure. Yeah, I think people probably either will notice and be maybe confused or not notice and then go about their business and pay no attention. But so I wonder, about these segments terminating at places that are not intersections. And I have another question related to the measurements. So I think one of the issues is that when they have the speed humps, then they really slow you to 15. We have those in a number of different school zone areas. And so you said you had measurements from Happy Valley. So what are their speeds after the speed humps were installed?
I don't have the data with me right now.
Okay, and Burton Valley, I know there was talk of, I think in Mr. Folkson's email of 22, but is that right? I mean, I know there were a lot of roads that have speed humps in Burton Valley. I'm interested in the ones right around the school, so Marywood and Roar.
It's hard to speed. Do we know what, they've
Yeah,
got
we
so
have
many
all
signs there.
Post-speed hump implementation post-study, so that was done, year and a half ago or so.
So are you seeing 22 on the streets that are marked here now for 15? Or are we seeing 15 right now? That's kind of what I'm after. Like, have the humps basically done the job?
I can't answer that without having the report
Okay,
in front of me.
okay. I think it would be helpful, because I mean, if we've effectively changed the speeds through this physical device, then we've accomplished our goal. And probably better than just putting a sign up on a road that doesn't have any kind of traffic calming. So my question is also about the speed on, School Street by Stanley Middle School, where there's a long road of speed humps. I'd be interested to know.
I'm sorry, you'd be interested to know again, what the immediate effect of the speed hump on.
Well, just what is the 85th percentile speed right now on those roads?
Yeah.
I think that there's definitely gonna be a sign issue for those particular streets where you have to mark the speed humps separately. So I think MUTCD requires you have to have certain advance warning of the humps. And even I think one right at the hump. So if you already have probably 2 or 3 signs that say 15 just for the humps, and now talking about adding in some more 15. So I think there will be clutter, and I guess I'm just wondering, do we need the 15 school zone signs and designation in places where there are speed humps?
Good question.
That's just a question to throw out there.
Principal,
Yes, go ahead.
I was gonna say, it wasn't long ago when the principal at the school there addressed safety around the school. And the ironic thing was that the parents cared so much about a few cars that were doing speeding. There weren't many, but they were letting their kids, they were not paying attention to the children as they came home from school. And what the children were doing was jumping off the roof of the school for fun. I mean, which is going to be more dangerous, I wonder. I don't know how anybody could speed through Burton Valley anyway, because there are so many signs there and so many humps and so many markings. It's sort of enough to drive you slightly nutty.
It's a good observation.
Well, I just think we have a weird sense sometimes.
I'd like to go back to something that Commissioner Weatherspoon brought up.
Okay,
Just-
wait,
just-
can I finish?
Oh, I'm sorry, go ahead. I'm
Oh.
sorry, I thought you were done.
I was just going to say that in France, and there was, I listened to a quiz, quite a quiz on the car radio one day. They were discussing why there were not many injuries with accidents. And it turns out that the cars are specifically designed differently from our cars, so that the kids who are hit, and inevitably they are, they just sort of, first the motor is in a different place, there are different construction methods, so that the kids aren't hurt
Yeah, but we live in
when
the,
they're hit. What?
I'm sorry,
Yeah.
but we live in the land of SUVs, so.
Yes, well, we do. But anyway, it is possible, if we really want not to hurt the children, redesign the cars like they do in France.
No, they don't. I'm sorry to say. I speak from experience.
I have a comment also,
Go ahead.
when you're available.
Go ahead.
I didn't want to preempt you from what you were going to say. I came into this a little conflicted because as our speaker mentioned, I have a difficult time driving 15 miles an hour anywhere. And I do limit myself. I'm very careful to limit myself to 25 or 20, and in neighborhoods I go less than the 25 that I know. But when I was first looking at the list of posted speed limits, there was a lot of them that were 25 or 20, on the end. And from those, those segments were gonna go down to 15. And so gets back to my first question of effectiveness. I'm questioning whether people, I know we want to generate a culture of slowing down as a way to reduce risk. I'm just a little conflicted on, is 15 the correct miles per hour, or is 20 or 25? I still haven't really kind of decided.
Well, you come back to my question of 15, are you better, you're not gonna die as opposed to 25, or, survival,
No.
you know.
Anyway, that I'm not saying what I would. I'm not opposed to doing 15 everywhere or 20 everywhere. I think that comments about is it necessary is worthy to be discussed.
There must be studies that we don't have.
Well, it's been studied. The speed relationship has been studied. I mean, it's very clear. If you're going
Oh, yes.
15 or 20 or 25, there's going to be an increase in death rate. But, question is, can we get the community to obey 15 miles an hour? I don't know.
Patrick, is it possible to see where I was trying to look on Google Maps, so I can't, where the speed humps are on some of these streets, like Stanley, outside Stanley, on School Street, or Marywood, or Stanley Boulevard? For some reason, my street view's not working on this computer.
There may not be the latest.
Street view on
may
Invert
not
Valley is
be.
up to date.
Oh, it is.
Stanley may not be.
Hmm.
For some reason, on my iPad, I can't get the street view person.
Oh, on iPad, you need to do it portrait.
Oh,
That's
okay.
it.
Thank you. We'll do that then.
It's a weird.
Oh, yes.
Yep.
Thank you. Wow.
Okay.
Yeah, I know that Mike had created these documents or these maps at one point, but I don't think I'd be able to pull it up very quickly, just to see where they are in relation to the school, in the 500 feet zone. Yeah, I can see them in the street. It's gonna take forever. I wonder if I can see it in satellite.
While Stella's doing that, can I just ask one quick question, going back to actually a comment that Stella made earlier regarding some of the 15-mile-per-hour speed zones starting or ending at locations other than at clearly defined intersections, which are more understandable to people. Is that determined by the fact that it has to be 500 feet? Or can you end it at a well-defined intersection if that's 50 feet short of 500?
I believe we can do that.
I think it's what Walnut Creek did.
Because as an example, and this is close to me because it's in my neighborhood, at St. Perpetua School, it would make a lot more sense to have the 50-mile-per-hour zone end at a Campo on the western side, where Hamlin meets a Campo, and then on the other side of St. Perpetua, the uphill side, to have it end where Hamlin meets Sweet. Those are well-defined intersections and would just make a lot more sense, especially to the neighbors in that area that would be driving. So,
Although I guess there's an end school, or there's a sign that's going to be posted, right?
Right.
So I mean, I'm not sure at each place it would make sense to do it at the intersection rather than wherever the 500 feet is, where the sign could be posted. I
don't know. I'm just saying that in terms of where you're going to start and stop at 500 feet, an intersection make most sense, especially in specific to that one location that I'm very familiar with. That would make a lot of sense. I'm sorry, and then
Oh, no, I mean, I agree with that. If you're in a street segment, you're going along 25 and then all of a sudden you're supposed to be 15, but you haven't gotten to the intersection. I think that's just a mental shift that drivers that they won't do. They'll just continue. So I don't know, to me, it seems like if you're coming up to a stop sign, you stop, you see a 15 ahead, you think, oh, okay. In my next movement, once I get through this, I'm now gonna hopefully be conscientious and obey that sign. So I mean, I cannot really see.
So
that
if you're looking at
really-
First Valley, it's, there's a hump, at Indian Way and at Santa Lynn.
So they're pretty far apart. I think
The
that's
house by the school is Foxton's house.
I think that School Street, they must be more dense. Like closer together.
School Street, there's one, just east of First Street, and then another one at, right before the big diagonal crosswalk. And then one around the corner on, Upper, roughly about, Copper Court. The School Street's not updated in preview.
Yeah, yeah. And then Happy Valley, you said had two around the school?
Yep. Yeah.
Okay. In my experience on Stanley is that there's two around that mid-block crosswalk, which very effectively slow people pretty much from the intersection at Camino Dablo, really after even that second speed hump, the second in the pair. And then there's going to be a new speed table coming in this summer as well. So I think that those are all going to be much closer perhaps than the ones that I see on Marywood. And so I really think that that corridor is just already gone down. I'd be so interested to see what measurements would show. But I would not be surprised if it's at 20 maximum, 85th percentile. And then I think it would probably even go down more once this third speed hump is put in, the speed table. So that's why I question if this is applicable or if it would have any intended, if we've already solved the problem on that street and maybe on some of the others.
Greg,
Yeah, I just want to say I'm generally in favor of the proposal. You know, speed has been an issue in everything we've done over the past 4 or 5 years. We first talked about this in October of 2021, soon after the legislature changed, the ability to do this. It's come up in the, our school safety reports, the LRSP report, and speed is always a factor. Now, that said, if there are good arguments for perhaps doing this in a more phased-in approach. I think there are schools that, we can look at that are potentially more susceptible to higher speed roadways. And so that, could be a recommendation we make to city council. But I think, overall, from a general project perspective, I support the intent.
okay. I would like to thank you for that. And I would like to return one final time, and you mentioned this in your comments, to the idea of phasing this in. When I brought this up before earlier in the meeting, I didn't hear any reaction to that. So I just wanted to find out what others might think about that. If that would make it easier for the city, the community to digest, if we do this incrementally in phases, addressing those schools, those streets where are experiencing higher speeds, where they need that treatment sooner, and then others can wait, and that gives the city time to do more education for the city to become more accustomed to this change. So, and that might address some of the concerns you had, Carl, too. I don't know. Because I don't see us being able to change, go from 15 to 20. I just don't think, I think that's outside of the scope of what we're considering here. But if you were to incrementally introduce this change, that might make it easier for people to understand and comply with. So, any thoughts or comments on that?
I like it all right.
Well, it sounds like you'd be
Just
asking
any other
for a
thing.
delay on the majority of the implementation till staff had an idea or communicated to us what are really the problem areas. Is that what you're suggesting?
Yeah, I don't think it's going to be. In my mind, I don't think it will be that difficult for staff working with the police department to identify those schools and those streets around those schools that really need this treatment sooner rather than later. And then based on that, introduce phasing for how this would be implemented over a certain period of time, whether it be 6 months or a year or whatever staff and the police decide is most appropriate. As an alternative to getting it done all at once this coming summer. So again, I'm just throwing that out to the commission to see if that makes any sense. If it doesn't, we can not do that.
I think that makes sense.
Yeah,
What,
I agree. I think it's a reasonable way to go about it. We can collect some more of this data that we don't have right now on some of the segments.
If I may differ, I think if we do it all at once, it's more visible and it's more consistent. That way the drivers know, okay, that school, just like that one, have to be at 15. If it's all done at once, again, people will be more aware, I should say.
If I can ask staff a question
Yes, go
about,
ahead.
what is the time frame again of the city council discussing the other speed limits, and is there a need for this to be decided to go to be heard in conjunction, or would it be possible to not to defer the decision on this report and then allow if that's useful to get more information on speeds around certain areas that Stella was asking. In other words, I'm just wondering whether this is something that we need to do tonight, or can you give us guidance on timing?
I was planning on bringing both studies to council at their March 25th meeting.
but we don't have to.
Don't have to, but to implement in the summer, I want time
right.
to get the messaging out and to work with the school PTAs and make sure there's enough time for sufficient messaging.
Mr. Chair, to clarify, my preference would be to push it forward with the caveat that, staff can get more information, for a presentation at the city council meeting. And then they may make the decision to phase it or just go all at once or do nothing. I don't know that it needs to come back here for our recommendation. But I think, staff can get that for the council report.
No, and I'm not suggesting it comes back to us.
Okay.
I'm just saying that we include in our recommendation the idea of phasing in versus doing it all at once.
I like that.
Just one thing, just I guess to point out the issues with the two, the ENTS and then this. So if council does bring El Nido Ranch down to 30 and then the 15 school zone is permissible, but the recommendation here is for 25, then you'll have not on that one, I'm talking about Happy Valley, I'm sorry. Happy Valley Road, ENTS talks about bringing the speed limit down to 25, council agrees with that, then this recommendation is for a 25-mile-per-hour school zone, but then the speed humps will be 15, so that they're gonna be discordant.
If Happy Valley comes down to 25 miles an hour, we could keep 25 miles an hour in front of the school. That is an option we can take, right? Just put up the appropriate signs, or go down to 15.
But aren't there speed humps in front of the school right now that have 15? That's what I mean. I guess I'm just confused because of this.
It doesn't say
This
speed hump
part of
15,
it.
it says speed hump ahead.
It doesn't say 15 miles per hour?
No.
They do on Stanley.
Checking. 25 or 11. Say 15. I don't know if it's required to say 15. Something I have to check.
But if I may,
Yeah,
if we were, the speed humps are in conjunction with a 15 miles an hour speed limit. Because the speed humps are more likely to be close to the school. It's just a reinforcement of the 15 miles an hour. That's what I wanted to say.
yeah, the situation, Danny, is that the recommendation right now for Happy Valley is 25, but there are speed humps that say 15. So that was just the discordance that I wanted to bring.
In front of the school, it should be 15, no?
The recommendation in this
Really?
report is 25.
Such a narrow road on top of that. I think, so anyway,
Or
do we have something?
Well, we are gonna act on something in just a moment, but I just wanted to get staff's reaction to the phasing idea.
I'm not supportive of it because for the reasons Yanni said, that this is really about messaging about safety around schools and wanting drivers to be aware and alert of the area that they're driving in. It's not my intention to go into each neighborhood and ask them if they want this or not. It's council's direction consistent with everything else they've been telling us to do, which is reduce speeds and enhance safety around schools. Those are the priorities that council has given us, staff. And so, I'm not sure what the phased approach would do. I'm not sure what the benefit would be.
And I'm not suggesting that if we were to adopt a phased approach, that at each phase, this would have to come back to us and go to the council for implementation for that phase. It would just be an understanding in the implementation plan that it wouldn't happen all at once. It would just happen in phases, in increments. With those streets and those schools and those streets that need this treatment the most due to speeds, they would get it at the beginning, the soonest.
But wouldn't the communication be confusing? We're reducing the speeds around these 3 schools and we're not doing it at these 4 or whatever it is. Feels that that's more confusing than we have 10 schools and here are these are the new speed limits around the schools. Here's 5.
Well, I assume the city would have a plan and the plan would be public. And the plan would very, very clearly establish what the timeline would be for each phase.
Or if I may say, it wouldn't be so clear because, so this school is at 15 while the school down the street is at 25. It gets confusing to the driver.
Well, you probably do, create zones or areas of the city where all the schools in those area, in that one area would be done at the same time. So you would try to avoid that kind of confusion taking place.
Well, I guess if I follow up on your point, the question is, there might be a natural phasing anyway, because you can't put them all in on one night, or it's gonna take, I don't know how many weeks, 2 or 3 weeks to install them all.
Yeah.
So to Bart's point, you might be able to prioritize, putting them in on certain areas that are, more dangerous or higher priority or however it's defined. And but if you're thinking about phasing to be spread over maybe months, is that more?
That's what I was contemplating.
Yeah, then that's a different
Yeah,
issue.
then you're doing it in the middle of a school year.
And then the driver is gonna say, how come this one is 15 and that other school is at 20? I don't drive anymore, but.
I would personally sort of like try to do some test runs just to see if it works the way we think it will work. I just wonder It sounds a bit of a mishmash to me.
Okay, I'm gonna make a motion that includes phasing, and we can either go with it or not. The motion would be for the city council, for the city of Lafayette school zone speed limit study to be forwarded to the city council with the recommendation to phase in implementation, installing 15-mile-per-hour speed zones at those schools and streets where speed is greater. That's,
I guess because some of them, they're not all recommended for 15, right? That shouldn't,
Reduce.
you're saying, yeah, as in the staff report.
as in the staff
Do you
report,
want a
yes,
second for that motion?
yeah, yes.
Second?
Sorry, Greg, I'm sorry, can you, what was your point?
Well, I think if to restate your motion, you, and correct me if I'm wrong, you wanted to forward the school zone speed limit studies to city council with a recommendation on phasing with the speed limits as set forth in the staff report or as recommended in the staff report.
Yes, yes.
But I personally would like to see some analysis to see how this is working.
Well, we're not contemplating bringing this back to
I
this commission.
know we're not, but I'm wondering if we should.
Well, we've suggested I think we suggested that staff bring that to the city
Yeah.
council, so they'll have benefit of that, but we're not gonna see this again. We're taking this action right now. No, we're taking this action right now
Yeah.
on what we're gonna forward to the city council. We have a motion on the table.
I'll
Yes,
second the
second.
motion. But I'd like to have discussion on the speed limits. Is that okay?
Yes, yes, yeah.
So, I still would like to understand, whether uniform 15 miles per hour is the correct goal. Is it the staff was saying that nobody else is doing 20 miles an hour anywhere? Is it really 15 or 25? Or maybe I misunderstood, maybe I didn't, maybe that's not you saying that, that's kind of what I'm thinking. If that's the case, then the question is 15 miles an hour in certain cases, is it necessary? I don't know what to say about that. So it might be that it's push the question up to the city council, and you can do more work on speeds before the presentation to the city council. I don't know.
Okay, if we should,
I don't have anything. I'm not trying to amend this. I'm just saying, in terms of discussion on this proposal, I'm still conflicted on whether it's enforceable or it's going to really permeate into the culture of the city.
I think-
I agree with Carl.
Well,
I
don't know if I
understand
agree
where
with myself.
Carl is coming from. I understand his complexion, but I think that if we're going to begin to question whether it should be 15 miles versus 20, I think that really goes to the core of what the city is trying to accomplish here. And I can understand the need for a change to 15 miles an hour from 25, given certain circumstances, which I think are being addressed in this. I'm okay with that. I'm just concerned about the breadth and the speed that this is going to be introduced throughout the city in all 22 of the streets. I'd like to see that slowed down and really focused on those schools and those streets that would really need the treatment sooner rather than later. So that's why I'm in favor of a phased approach versus doing it all at once within a period of a month or a couple months.
Okay.
So, and I agree with Greg. I think that we should be very clear that we are supportive of the speeds that were outlined in the study.
Okay.
So, do I need to restate this, or are we clear on the motion that's on the table?
Fine.
One second.
Thank you, Carl.
It's been seconded. So, can I have a vote? All in
Yeah.
favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any nays? I didn't hear any nays.
Nay.
Nay? Nay? One nay. So we have,
but you understand why.
Yes, yes,
Okay,
okay.
no, I'm all for the speed limit.
So all voted in favor except for, Commissioner Serrier, who voted nay.
Okay.
So that concludes that item. Moving on.
Wait, I had one more. But also financially, it will be easier for the contractor to do it all at once rather than coming back, over a couple months. So that's something for staff.
I appreciate those efficiencies in getting it all done and council can consider that. Moving on to item 8, Commissioner and staff updates. Thank you, Mr. Key.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Do we have any, first we'll start with Commissioner updates.
Yeah, I can do an update that the General Advisory Commission or Committee will be meeting tomorrow
Yeah.
to begin talking about land use.
I didn't catch the first part of you.
The General Plan Advisory
Okay.
Committee will be meeting tomorrow to begin talking about the land use element.
Any other commissioner reports? If not, let's move to our updates.
It's not a commission, I don't have anything to really report other than I wanted to follow up on our meeting before the city council. I think Bart did a really great job. And I thought that the presentation was really good presentation.
When was that?
Last Monday,
Last Monday, yeah.
No, we were supposed to be there.
you were invited. Anyway,
And thank you for the lovely tribute.
you're welcome. It's well
I
deserved.
heard about that one.
Well deserved.
Okay.
Well deserved.
Thank you.
Yeah, confused.
Add one other thing, not an update on the activity, but it's something that I would like if we could discuss at some point in the commission, in another meeting, is education regarding use of e-bikes legally and safely, especially amongst school-age children.
I agree with that.
I don't know if that's something we could agendize just for general discussion.
Is that possible?
It is possible. You want it as just a discussion about what could be done, is that?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
Yeah, discuss the topic and see what commissioners' thoughts are.
Yeah, you might consider inviting one or more owners. There's several bike shops in town that also rent e-bikes. They could probably explain rules as well as get some publicity out of it.
It's a good suggestion. Is the police looking at this? Are you aware? I don't know. Okay. You might check on that, and if they are, maybe they might want to attend to.
I think that would be very helpful.
Yeah.
Yeah. I bring it up because I've seen a lot of kids out and about. And I was very surprised to learn that you need to have a driver's license to operate a battery powered.
You do.
You do. So I thought it would be helpful for, us to maybe talk
Yeah.
about
Okay, well,
these new modes.
In the bicycle world, there are two kinds of electric assisted bicycle. One is with like a better word, an accelerator, so you don't have to push on the pedal.
Mhm.
And the other one is really assisted because you have to push on the pedal, so it's not, you don't have a,
Let's bring it to the meeting.
yeah.
Yeah.
But nonetheless, it was more of an information. There are two kinds of electric bicycles.
any updates from staff? Okay, great, thank you. Then I think that finishes the agenda, so I think we can conclude this meeting. So I will adjourn this meeting. It is 8. I can't read the
29.
28, 29, 28, 29. Thank you.
You don't have a problem.